Well, welcome to a special edition of Let's Talk. I'm Kent Adams, founder and executive producer of Spokane Talks Media here, and good to have a friend of mine back on the air. Good to have someone you've listened to in Spokane and the Inland Northwest for 45 years on the radio. I'm pleased to say I've been a friend with Mike Fitzsimmons for about 43 years. Have to blame him a little bit on getting me into and talking me into doing talk radio about 40 some years ago. And Mike Fitzsimmons, welcome back to the microphone.
Hello, Kent. How are you?
I'm doing
Thank
fine.
you
How are
for
you doing?
inviting me on board today. This is going to be kind of interesting because it's been almost 2.5 years since I did a live afternoon show, and it used to start it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know whether that was part of your long scheme or not, but I know that was when we used to do this, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
This is a technology. You and I have talked about this many a time, but this is a technology, this podcasting process that is the new and cutting edge of broadcast technologies in the future. And I think that this is going to get better and better and better over the years to the degree that, it'll replace radio. It's already very much taking up the slack left by the slow demise of AM radio. And without a doubt, it's going to be what people are going to be getting news and information and opinion and interactive sharing with respect to
Yes,
issues
absolutely.
in the future that was not possible before.
Yeah. So tell the people out there what you've been doing the last few years and what ends this May for you.
Well, for the last almost 18 years now, I've been a full faculty member over at Gonzaga University teaching in the integrated media department, and I've been teaching broadcasting and media law and a variety of other courses. And this is my final semester. I will be retiring at the end of May from teaching and therefore into, I guess, what you could call full retirement if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I failed at that.
Now, you retired a few years ago, and you have had nothing to do since then.
Right. So
But
let's
anyway, I
let me ask.
appreciate the opportunity to get together with folks and chat about things. This is a time, I can't in the years, last couple of years, 2.5 years, that I was not on the radio. There were so many times where I was driving down the
Yeah,
freeway or whatever in between Spokane and my home in Coeur d'Alene and thinking, God, I wish I was on the air today because I got a lot to say about that. And, couldn't, obviously, didn't have a pulpit, if you will.
yeah,
And I still feel that way. And that being the case, this couldn't be a better time. There's so much going on right now. And people are so in need of knowing things, and they're so curious about it, perhaps even more so than they have been in years, about how things are going, why they're happening the way they're happening, and what it means to them. So this is, in a way, there's a number of silver linings in this coronavirus issue that I think will be of benefit to us long haul.
yeah. We're seeing an uptick in viewership right now just because there are many more people on the internet right now, and we know what's happened to TV. We know what's happened to radio in a lot of ways. Locally, there are the last talk show, locally produced talk show, went off the air. What was it, last week?
Yeah, Rick Lucan's a good, longtime friend of mine, and Dennis
Yeah,
Patchen, a longtime friend of mine and yours,
yeah,
disappeared from the airwaves. And by the way, that kind of thing was happening. Look what happened just a couple of months ago when iHeartRadio,
yes,
hacked apart some 1,200 radio station personnel across the nation, including Teresa Lukens here in the Spokane market on KQNT. Yeah, it is fallen apart. I think in many respects that is a mistake they'll learn to regret. The industry will learn to regret.
yeah, yeah. Where
Largely
is it
because, I
going?
might add, this is going to take up the slack, and if this takes up the slack, this kind of thing, then there's no
Yeah.
going back for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know this. We've gone from kind of a hobby a few years ago to in 2018, we had 410,000, I think it was, views of our videos. And last year, over 730,000, and we'll be over 1 million this year. We're going up, and other stations, local TV stations, are going down, although up right now because of all of the current issues and so forth. But the fact is, many of our programs get more viewers than the second and third place local news TV stations here in town.
Well, part of it has to do with access. Part of it has to do with on demand. You can watch a program on this medium anytime you want to, day or night, 24/7, and you can take it with you live as well. Those sorts of things meet what has been a development in the media business, particularly since the digital media took over, if you will, and the public wants it that way, and particularly younger audiences. So this is, I think, a natural, transition, an evolution into where it was intended to go.
Now, people can call in video wise and just with their iPhone or iPad. And how do they do that? How do they get connected to our station?
Well, all they have to do is to we have a slide that we can show you here. This is the email address that you get to. There's a little protocol you have to go through, and the protocol requires that you get a password so that you can come onto the program. And
right.
Vinny, who is our producer, can then put that together, and moments later, you and I are talking together.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You're in Coeur d'Alene, I'm in Spokane, and Vinny is out in the Spokane Valley producing the program. Welcome to the electronics of 2020, right?
Yeah. More than that, anyone who calls in who is watching on YouTube because we're streaming, or on Facebook Live, we're streaming, they could be in Cape Town, South Africa, and get on the program.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I might mention right now, just simply because more people will see this later after it's live than they will live.
Sure.
And so we're sending this out at 4 o'clock on Thursday the 9th. So if you see how to get into the program after the 4 to 5 o'clock hour on the 9th, it's been recorded and you're watching a recording. So I just didn't want people to go panic and poor Vinny's phone to go off constantly, right?
Absolutely. But again, this is a new technology for everybody. I mean, you and I have been in this business a long time, and when we had to go into online classes, rather short order, after the students at Gonzaga had disappeared on the 6th of March for their spring vacation, then were told not to come back. It was a crash course on this sort of thing, and it was it's still interesting, and I still I like playing piano with two thumbs. It's still kind of baffling sometimes, but once you get the hang of it, it works pretty well.
Well, Mike, I'm going to let you have your program. And I think we have a couple of pre-recorded questions for you that just came in today. And so have a great program and welcome to Spokane Talks.
Thank you very much, Kent. I appreciate it. Now, we do have some pre-recorded programs, but I also want to remind you that if you want to come on live with me, all you have to do, again, Vinny's going to flash that protocol for you. This is the email address that you need to use. And when you make that email, take a couple of little procedures that you have to go through, and then we can talk live. But in any event, as Kent mentioned, there are some folks who decided that they wanted to pre-record a message, which of course you could do as well. And let's go to the first of those, shall we?
Tom in Spokane Valley, longtime fan and friend. Hey, I had a question for you. Of all the times that I listened to you for Firestorm and Ice Storm and all of the things that we've been through together, what impressed me most of all were the times you connected with somebody on the air. Gave them a piece of advice, gave them a piece of information, gave them something that they needed at that time to be safe, to be happier, to be healthy. So now, all these years later, I'm wondering if you ever had a chance to go back to some of those people and meet them in person and talk to them in person and found out how it made a difference in their lives that you were behind the microphone. So what do you think? How did you make a difference with that mic?
Well, Tom, that's a good question. And yes, I did meet up with some of those, not because necessarily that I pursued them but that they found me. And I still to this very day meet people all the time who were steady listeners to my Newscope program, and some who date clear back, to the days in which Mount St. Helens was erupting and such. And yeah, I've kept contact with a number of those folks, and they have uh, some of them have changed the way they view the world to a certain extent. Some of them are still as what would the word be? Still as opinionated as they were then. I haven't convinced them about anything, but it's interesting when someone will come up to me as a woman did not too long ago in a grocery store over here in Coeur d'Alene and said, "I listened to you for years," and that's always gratifying to me, and it's always gratifying when they tell me that you said this about some subject, or you had this particular position, or you gave this piece of advice on the air, and it touched me, and I was interested in what you had to say, and to change the way I viewed things, particularly some type of an issue, perhaps, but sometimes just a general philosophy about things. So it was pretty gratifying to have people do that. Still is. It's been, I left the airwaves in December, the end of December of 2017. So it's been 2.5 years, and it's extremely humbling that people still remember that and still have a desire to talk and all. And I get invited to do speaking engagements, not as many as I used to do when I was on the air on a regular basis, but I get a chance to do that as well and talk about things, current event things. And I teach current events. I teach media literacy, and I teach media law in college. So I'm still very connected to all of this. And I hope I'll remain so even after I retire, because I also have an immense curiosity about media, and have been a media critic most of my life. I spent, as Kent mentioned, 45 years in this business. And having done that, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak. And that being the case, I've developed quite a few theories about things. You could agree with me or not agree as you choose. I've never cared whether or not I changed your mind so much as I cared that I at least appealed to you to think about things. And that was what always was important to me on the air, and still is. Anyway, you can get a hold of us if you would like to. I understand we have another question, so let's go to that.
Hi, my name is Brianna, and my question for Mike is, how old were you when you got into broadcasting, and what inspired you to do it in the first place?
How old was I? I was in my early 20s, and I was always fascinated with broadcasting. I grew up in Seattle. As a young kid, we moved out from White Plains, New York, and I grew up in Seattle through the decade of the 50s and 60s, went to grade school and high school there. And right outside my bedroom window was Lake Washington over the hill, and down I could see it. And there they raced hydroplanes in the summertime during the Seafair and Gold Cup contests. And there were all 3 television stations in Seattle that used to cover every qualifying run. Can you imagine that? Interrupting your favorite soap opera at 10 o'clock in the morning to watch some boat leave the dock, go about 50 feet and conk out, and then they returned you back to the studios. That's the way it was back in the 1950s. You'd never see that happen again, but that's the way it was. And there were some fascinating broadcasters at that time. One of them was a gentleman by the name of Bill O'Mara, who was a sports director for KING Television, King 5 TV in Seattle. And I met him a few years before I actually got into broadcasting. I got an opportunity to do some radio coverage of hydroplane racing in the Tri-Cities, and later television coverage in 1971 over in Seattle, the very first one. I did a total of 43 Seattle Seafair hydroplane broadcasts on television live, both on KING TV and on KIRO TV, the CBS affiliate over there. And I was fascinated with the way it all worked, just plain fascinated with it. And so I wanted to continue in it on a permanent basis, and was also a pretty good talker and a fairly well educated as to current affairs and what have you. So I got into the news business with an all news radio station called KSPO, and from there they put me on a Sunday night talk program, which ran from 6 o'clock until midnight on Sunday nights, called Dialogue. I actually didn't originate that show. There was a fellow before me by the name of Rick Van, who was some of you old time radio listeners in Spokane may remember that name. Rick had that show before I did. I took it over after he left the station. And it was the only talk radio show in Spokane at all. And then I expanded. I became news director there, and I expanded that program into a daily program, Monday through Friday program, not a Sunday night show. Kent did that program a few times himself back at that time. We're now talking middle to late 70s. And then when I moved over to KXLY, I was a television news director for a period of time, and then back to radio as a news director, a newscaster, a commentator, and a talk show host, and remained in that role still until the end of December of 2017. But it's always fascinated me. I tell my students, there's a certain fascination to walking the tightrope without a net. Live broadcasting is that way. I mean, you can produce wonderful programs and edit them and provide graphics and music and sound mixes and audio mixes and special effects and all that sort of thing. And those are wonderful, and entertainment television does that all the time. But if you really want to get a thrill, step out on the tightrope for a half hour, 3 hours, as the case may be, with a usual scheduled talk show, and wing it the whole way. And you don't really wing it. You got to be very well prepared. You got to know what you're going to do. But there's a thrill to that, to being able to beat the odds and to not fall off the rope, which of course occasionally you do, but you don't plunge into the abyss if you know what you're doing. And so I always enjoyed that. It's always been a great satisfaction to me. And broadcasting is not the only profession that offers you that kind of a scenario, but it certainly is one that does it on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. And so I've always liked that. So that's a good question, but it's been a rewarding ride, I can say, and I've enjoyed it a lot. Sometimes there were ups and downs, of course, and sometimes there were difficulties. And sometimes you wonder, how did I get into this? But by and large, it was a good thing. Again, if you want to talk live, here is the protocol that you can use to get in. Vinny at SpokaneTalksMedia.com. If you want to ask a question or you want to get into a conversation about something, current events, this whole coronavirus thing is something that I think we need to talk about. I've been watching this thing closely. I got to tell you, I'm of a mind that maybe we didn't handle this as a nation the best way we could have. And I'm wondering about some of the things we relied upon that now, in hindsight, we probably should not have, because the information was not as truthful or as reliable. And I'm talking specifically the statistics that we've been looking at. I mean, you remember, it wasn't but 30 days ago that they told us that we were going to see between 1 million and 2 million people die in this country as a result of COVID-19. They were sure of it. And then all of a sudden, in a very short period of time, in fact, if you were paying close attention, and I was, 6.5 days later, the number was somewhere between 140,000 and 240,000 Americans would die. And then they revised it downward again and again and again. And right now, they're saying that sometime between now and August, we will have reached a total amount of casualties, fatalities as a result of COVID-19 at 60,000. Today, as I understand it, give or take the last few hours, where I'm sure the statistics change because they do virtually on an hourly basis, we're at 15,000 nationwide. 15,000 nationwide. And we have certain hotspots they talk about where the situation is more intense, and other places where we've got little. For example, I live in Kootenai County in northern Idaho. We have, as of today, I just checked shortly before we started the program today, I checked, and we have 45 cases of Corona-19 in Kootenai County, and no deaths. So my question would be then, if you just looked at those numbers, would it not make sense that maybe we are not it is not necessary for us to conduct ourselves quite the same way that folks in a concentrated community like New York City have to conduct themselves with about 8.5, 9 million people, shoulder to shoulder on that island, Manhattan. I have a son back there, and they're hunkered down, obviously it's important for them to do that. But we don't seem to have the same kind of problem they have, although the instigator of everybody's problem is this COVID-19 virus. So we need better intel. And they keep talking about this being the equivalent of going to war, right? The president calls himself a wartime president. And we're supposedly at war with this coronavirus, this invisible enemy. But the truth is, if we were going to go to war with any enemy, would we not want to have the very best, most accurate, purest, reliable intel before we chose strategies and tactics that we were going to use? We chose strategies and tactics with a general overview concept of intel that now appears to have been not just wrong, completely wrong. I mean, 30 times less than what we were told the worst case scenario was going to be. And it keeps modifying downward. I'd be surprised, frankly, just looking at the numbers and watching the trends. And you don't have to be a paragon of intelligence, and I'm certainly not, to be able to do that. You just look at the numbers. You can look at the days that go by. You can look at the environments where these numbers are generated, the communities that have them and such. And you can realize, you know what? This isn't quite the way it was told to us. We were going to have this problem, that problem, and we're not. I mean, yes, you've got crowded hospitals in New York City, no question, and you have crowded hospitals in some of the other hot spots, New Orleans, for example, New Jersey, for example. But you also have hospitals that were supposed to be far more crowded than they ever were that are now emptying out, even in places like Southern California, Colorado, Washington. You got to ask yourself, did we operate with good intel on this situation? We shut down 40% of America's booming economy on the theory that that was a necessary strategy in order to save ourselves. And now I got to tell you, I mean, I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm suggesting that we were probably premature with that decision. It probably wasn't necessary. And I don't mean that you don't stay 6 feet apart and practice social distancing. I'm not suggesting that. And I don't mean that you shouldn't wear a mask, that's unnecessary. If you feel as though that's important to you for your own peace of mind, do it. But I do mean that a lot of industries got shut down that are contributing no more to this problem in many, many communities than the industries that did not get shut down. And that's the part that kind of troubles me. That's the part that kind of bothers me. I understand that we got a lot of people who work in America. I mean, somebody's got to be working in the power plants that create the electricity that you're using. Somebody's got to be working in the communication centers that keep your cell phones working and keep your television, loaded with programming. Even if they're working from home, there are people working. But the point being is that there are a lot of folks at work. You've got people who are involved in policing and fire protection. You've got certainly the medical community who are doing a heroic job, but they're working. You got the grocery stores open, but you also have the big box stores that are selling products for home improvement that are still open. You've got an awful lot of businesses that are very much like, in terms of not necessarily the product that they sell or whatever, but in terms of the populations of their workplaces, such as stores and what have you, that are very much the same as a Safeway and Albertsons or a Costco. And they're not reporting an extraordinary amount of COVID-19. So you have to ask yourself, what's going on here? I mean, where did these numbers come from? And did we buy into a scenario that was overstated by far? Not that it was. I'm not willing to accept that there's some kind of some type of a conspiracy going on here, where people have certain motivations. I've heard an awful lot of theories along those lines, and some of them sound, fairly plausible. But I don't think, other than China itself, I don't think there's anybody that's really trying to harm us by doing this. I think China lied to us. I think China understated what was going on. I think China continues to do that. Interesting if you look at what's happening in Wuhan, where this originated. They were handing out, over the last 14 days, approximately 54,000 urns of the remains of people who died with this COVID-19 virus. And China's never admitted that, never reported that. Now, why not? Well, you can't trust anything that comes out of China. They lie all the time to us. They have all the time, many times. I mean, this is a totalitarian regime, a communist regime, and it covers up its mistakes. And then I think you have the cooperation of the World Health Association, or organization rather, WHO, that is essentially carrying the water for China to a certain extent. I think we've learned that. We did not get told that this was being transmitted from animal to human. Approximately a month and a half this was going on before we ever learned that it was. Had we learned that then, we might not have had anywhere near the threat that we currently deal with, and we would not have had the response that we are currently operating with. You think about that. There's a lot of incongruities associated with this story. I think that the folks who are trying to battle this are doing the very best they can, and I don't think they're insincere about it. Not the president, not the coronavirus task force, not the vice president, not the industries that have stepped up in an unprecedented way to help get this situation done, because they're knowing full well that if we don't get this health situation stabilized, we're not going to get the economy stabilized, and we're in for a world of hurt much worse than what coronavirus can deliver to us. So there are a number of things on my mind about that, and I wonder if there's things on your mind about that. If there is, give me a call. Check it out. Here again is the way to do that. It's Vinny at SpokaneTalksMedia.com. That's the email address for you to get a hold of us. And if you want to ask a question, you can go ahead and do that. We'll take a little break right now. We'll be right back in about a minute and a half or so, and we'll continue until 5 o'clock this evening.
Here at River Ridge Hardware, we can match any color for you. So you need this color matched for your trim in your bathroom. Come to the color computer, stick it into the spectrometer, and allow the machine to do its thing, and it will match your trim exactly. So whether it was done by water damage or a young child, we can get you covered and get it matched. If you do need to have something so that it completely disappears, I can certainly help you with that one as well. Along with the spectrometer color matching capability that can match any competitor's paint color, we have a beautiful color palette that can help you start any new project. Give us a try.
After I got divorced, I had medical debt, credit card debt, and student loan debt. I was dealing with a lot of guilt. I found myself shopping to feel better. When my son was born, wanting to manage my finances was no longer a want, it was actually a need. STCU made that possible for me. I use the mobile app every single day. I'm able to color code all of my different savings accounts. And when you have nice things to look at, I think it brings you on a deeper level of motivation. I'm Kamika Love, the Budget Mom, and STCU is here for good.
Well, this is Bloomsday in Spokane. We got about 40 firefighters and their friends and family handing out 40,000 cups of water as the day goes by.
It's a very good opportunity to see the public and support them and help them out and cheer them on during Bloomsday.
It's one of the best things about Spokane is that we have these major events and the whole community comes together not just to participate, but to volunteer and show that they really care about our city and making our city look great.
This type of an event really is emblematic of Spokane because so many people get involved. We have 50,000 people probably running this race. Always has been a very huge event.
Right now we're at the corner of Broadway and Nettleton. It's the last water station before the finish, so people are pretty much dehydrated by the time they get to us. They really need our water.
The water stations are a vital part, especially on warm days like today. It's real important that we have the volunteers to help with that. Without the volunteers, Bloomsday wouldn't exist.
All up and down the course, there are people that are involved in this celebration. It really is a celebration of what Spokane's all about.
What's it going to be like when Bloomsday takes place in September as opposed to May? As you know, they've had to postpone it because of the coronavirus situation. So we have a live caller on the line who wants to join me, and let's do that right now. Welcome.
Fitzsimmons, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. So I was mainly curious, your expertise in the media realm after all of these years. How do you think the media response has been in terms of, I was a kid when 9/11 happened. I was a middle schooler during the 2008 recession, so I never saw how the media responded to all of that. So what do you think the media response and reaction has been like in terms of COVID-19?
I've watched now for 5 decades almost, and I've watched a slow and steady degradation of the media, particularly of journalism and journalistic ethics, particularly broadcast journalism and journalistic ethics, but it's also true of the newspapers. And in the last few years, 2015 to the present day, the last 5 years, let's say, I have seen, that downward slope plunge, literally plunge downward. The media is no longer the bearer of news and information. The media is now completely about advocacy. Completely. There's almost no media outlet that isn't. Not only that, but the polish that the craft used to have, the ability to write a good, clean, crisp, compelling sentence, for example, is gone by the wayside.
Hello, Justin, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's Vinny. I'm not quite sure why the mic cut out. It might have been something with the
Not
internet
the
or
sheriff's
something.
department told me.
Looks like he's back.
That kind of a thing. See, and that has been, in my opinion, a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. But then along comes Donald Trump, okay? And the media decided that he was an idiot and a fool. And so they treated him that way. And then they were stunned in November 2016 when the guy became president of the United States. And I think to a certain extent that they had a inescapable guilt complex over the situation because they gave him an awful lot of media time, thinking that they were just basically degrading him and disgracing him, but they really weren't. They were actually fueling the fire of a long, we used to call it the silent majority, but there was a very large number of Americans who were so sick of politics as usual and the left and the right and the leaning toward an amoral or immoral America loaded with liberal concepts and now socialism, that Donald Trump was able to resonate with those sorts of folks, and the media decided it was their job. In fact, the New York Times, in the fall of 2016, after he was elected president of the United States, basically took upon themselves to tell their readers that it's our job to destroy this guy, okay? Like somehow or other they were the agents of, the good angels, so to speak. And the media has then gone completely into the tank of the far left and has attempted to destroy the presidency. And the amazing thing about this president is that because he didn't owe anybody anything, he didn't have any political debts he had to pay. He didn't have to be careful to offend some special interest group because he owed no special interest group any allegiance to begin with. He became literally, now even when you look at this COVID virus situation and you look at how he built the economy, he became the perfect on paper president to do this because he didn't have any baggage. All right, none. And since he didn't, the media hated him all the worse. And stop and think what they have tried to do. I have never seen, I'm going to be 72 in June, and I have never seen a president in my lifetime, and I've covered, even interviewed many. I have never seen a president in my lifetime have to endure what this president has had to endure from a media that has tried everything, of course, obviously doing the bidding of the far left Democratic Party at the same time. But the point being is that I've never seen them do this to any president in history like they've done it to him, and still be losing the game to him. They are losing the game to him, and they hate him. I mean, look for example, if Trump had come out and said that this malaria drug, the drug that's now being prescribed anecdotally, if he had come out and said, you know what, I don't think that's the way we should go. I don't think we should touch that. The media would be all over him for trying to prevent a very good treatment from being useful to the public. But instead, he came out and endorsed it. And so what happened? The media was against it instantly and tried to convince you should not be taking that. Do you know that they are distributing 40 million doses of that a day across the United States and Europe and Asia? And if they weren't, a lot of people would be dying. And when he decided to close the border to China on the 31st of January, what did they say? Well, he's a xenophobe. He's a racist. I mean, the word racist anymore doesn't mean anything at all. It's used so often that it's just, I used to think that the F word was the universal word you could use for almost anything, but now racism has replaced the F word as the universal word of language. You can attach it to virtually anything you want to. But the point being is that this guy has been battered and beaten and shot at and slashed, and what? He's still standing. Not only is he standing, but he's standing still strong. He's going to get reelected by a landslide in November. You can be sure that he's going to. And, look, he's not a particularly articulate individual. I mean, they got a drinking game now for the coronavirus, daily briefings, right? How many, you got to take a drink if he says fantastic or tremendous or all this kind of, it's a joke. But the bottom line, look, the guy is not the most articulate. Barack Obama was, but in my opinion, he was articulate to the degree that it covered up the fact that he was the all-time worst president in history. But you have a president here who may not be able to say it nice, but don't listen to what he says. Look at what he's done, right? Look at what he's done. Look what that economy was like 4 weeks ago. The best in my lifetime, the best in anybody's lifetime. And the president still has the sense that he can get it back. Look, I used to think the guy was a buffoon too. In the summer of 2016, 15 rather, not 16, but when he was running against the other, 16 or 1,700 Republicans that were running at that time, I used to think, like, this guy's the last guy on my list. But on the 16th of September, 2016, on my radio talk show on KXLY, I said he would win the presidency, and I said he would win it by 312 electoral votes. I was wrong by 6. I didn't get Nevada correct. But I said it that early, and I was certain of it, and it never, ever occurred to me that I was wrong about that because the numbers were there. I saw the solid support. I think it's going to be a great deal more than that. I mean, come on. Joe Biden should be in a home. He shouldn't be running for president. And the Democrats know it, so basically it's already unless Trump completely screws up, which he has not done, it's going to be a by default victory for the president for a second term. But the media is going to continue to work on this. As to your question again, they're going to continue to try to beat him up. Look at how many things they've tried to find, how many theories they've tried to sell you on, right? Nobody's buying anymore. Nobody's buying anymore. The only thing lower than the media anymore is whale dung on the bottom of the sea. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? The media is a disgrace in this country, and their comeuppance are coming. you watch? Thanks for your question.
Thanks, Mike.
Your thoughts then. What do you think?
No, that's a good, good point. Being in media as well, it is kind of interesting to see, going through school and learning some of these things, seeing what is going on and how news is presented and how it's not so much they're trying to just report what's going on, as much as they're trying to create their own perception of what's going on, and trying to, direct people one way or the other. And that's one thing I think that's the toughest to understand is where does that happen? Because so often as you're learning to become a journalist, work in media, one of the big things they really do try and hammer home is, it's all about neutrality. You report it, what's going on, and you let other people make up the minds on their own. And so much it's not like that.
Yeah. The media are the gatekeepers. I mean, after all, there's 20,000 stories a day they could tell, and in a half-hour TV broadcast on a major network or whatever, or in a newspaper, so many column inches available and that sort of thing, they've got to make a decision as to what stories they will tell and what stories they won't. And so they pick those, and they don't tell you necessarily what you should think, but they tell you what you should think about all the time, right? And that's their agenda. And then they lace it. They frame photographs, they frame language, they frame positioning of stories, as to priority and importance. And we all buy that as, well, that's really an important story. Oh, no, that's a big deal, right? And very often we just sort of suck in the Kool-Aid, and we don't realize that we're being poisoned. That we don't realize it. But then sometimes we do. Sometimes we see it. Sometimes we go, wait a second, that can't be right. And more, I think that sort of thing is happening. But there's one other element here that I am troubled by. People watch particularly television news and read certain of the major newspapers of record in the country, kind of like the way they root for sports teams, right? You watch the newscast that's going to tell you the stories you want to hear the way you want to hear them, as opposed to the truth necessarily. And by the way, that fits both sides of the spectrum. It's not just the left, it's not just the right, it's both sides of the spectrum, right? The idea of objectivity is long since out the window. And the media has a tendency to tell a story the way they want you to see it. They frame it, okay? Whether it's or to the right or to the left, or whether it's any of the extremes along the continuum, that's how they do it. And when they do it that particular way, certain fans, if you will, sign up. They like, oh yeah, tell me more about that. I hate that guy. Tell me more about why I should hate that guy, or I love that guy. Don't touch him. That kind of stuff. We get a lot of that. So, bottom line is, it's our fault too. If we really want a media that reports the news, we have complete control over the process, because after all, the media is a business. And if the business has no readers, no viewers, it's got no revenue, and it's dead in the water. But we haven't discovered our power yet. Thank you for your call. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate
Have a good day.
You too. Take care. All right, we had another pre-recorded question, and we're going to get to that when we take this break first, and we'll come on back, and we got another pre-recorded. And if you want to talk, let me give you that web number again. Here it is, Vinny at SpokaneTalksMedia.com, and take you a moment or two to get connected up and a password to get in, and then we can talk face to face. And we'll be right back in just a moment.
Join us at Paint Night, where you release your inner artist, hosting events in Spokane and surrounding areas. We are the party on wheels and can come to your choice of locations. We specialize in private events, corporate team building, and fundraisers. We are the original Paint Night and want you to join in the fun. Check us out at www.paintnight.com, and we always offer $10 off with the code SPOKANE10.
National Barricade and Sign Company is a well-established company founded in 1957. National Barricade has become a well-known business in the Spokane Valley for more than 50 years. Over the years, we have built long-lasting relationships with many cities, counties, and their departments of transportation. Customers come to us because they know they are going to get the best quality service at the best possible price. National Barricade prides itself on getting the job done in a timely manner. We know that contractors must have certain items in a timely fashion to get their job done, and if we don't have it, we will get it. We guarantee fast service no matter how long it takes.
Hi, this is Tim Lane with State Farm with your quick winter tip. One of the most common questions I get is about trees and who's responsible for a fallen tree or branches. The answer comes down to negligence. If your neighbor's tree falls and damages your home, vehicle, or personal property due to a weather-related incident, then your insurance company would cover that as a non-fault loss. If you can prove negligence against your neighbor, city, or county, then they are legally responsible for your damages. If you have any coverage questions or would like a second opinion on your insurance, call my team and I at Tim Lane State Farm at 509-926-5135.
Imagine being ordered to stay home when you have no home to go to. Because of generosity from people like you, Union Gospel Mission is able to provide a place of safety and refuge for men, women, and children who have nowhere else to go. Today, more than ever, the vulnerable in our community need your help. Thank you for your generous tax-deductible gift in their time of need.
Welcome back to the program. And again, let me give you the tagline you need to get a hold of if you want to talk with us directly, and that is Vinny at SpokaneTalksMedia.com. If you go ahead and send a text to Vinny, he'll be able to set you up with a password, and that'll allow you to get into the system so that we can chat with you face to face. We have another pre-recorded question that was sent to us, and let's see what that's all about.
Hi, my name's Cindy, and my question is, why did you leave broadcasting when you did, and what brings you back now?
Okay, Cindy, I didn't leave broadcasting voluntarily. I know that the story was out there that I decided to retire. Actually, I did not decide to retire. I was retired. I was told at mid-December of 2017 that at the end of the month my program would be canceled. So that's why I left broadcasting. Never really left broadcasting in the larger sense, however, because I was teaching it and still do at Gonzaga University. And so I was still very much engaged in it, very much in connection with the broadcast community, placing students of mine in internships and helping them find jobs when they graduated and things of that nature. So I never really got out of the industry, got out of the on-air part of it. Coming back, I really haven't come back, full scale at this point. But I've done some projects for Spokane Talks. I've enjoyed working with Kent. I think he's on to something. I think that this is a cutting-edge effort that's going to take a leading role even on a national scale. They're doing things with this particular company that nobody has achieved yet. And they're just showing you, for example, that, let me put it this way. The business of broadcasting is connecting audiences to advertisers. However you do that successfully in the demographics that are most desirable by the advertisers, the more successful you're going to be. Now, if you put a live program like this one on the air, and people can watch it and people can participate in it, that program is over when it's over. If you can do a rebroadcast of that, it can be seen again, all right? And people will do that. If you put programming on that allows people to access it at a time in which they want to access it to get the information they want, then you are essentially accessing multiple audiences. And those multiple audiences then become a cumulative number that is larger than what conventional broadcasting might be able to deliver on its best day. And that is the economics in a nutshell of how this process works. Not only that, but the interactivity aspect of it. Talk radio is very successful because people can share their thoughts with talk hosts and that sort of thing. But local stations, radio stations, are discovering that the profitability of conventional broadcasting is not as high as it used to be and not likely to get high again. Hence, they are reinventing themselves and have to. I understand the reason why they do these things. I understand that. It's the cycle of the economics of the industry, and it just is what it is. I'm not certainly not concerned that that there's any malcontent associated with this. It causes people to have to do these are economic decisions that stations make with respect to their staff, and I respect that. I understand that. That's the way it goes. It happens in all industries, in fact. But anyway, as I say, I'm not fully back, and as I am retiring from Gonzaga University, I've been at it a long, long time. But once you get bitten by the bug, I guess you get the disease for a lifetime, and that's kind of what I got. I've kind of been bitten by the bug long ago, several decades back. I was bitten by the bug, and I'm still very much interested in it. I like the opportunity to be able to share thoughts with people, and most of all, and by the way, when you hear me say things, if it inflames you and you want to pull over the side of the road and throw rocks, why don't you just call in? I'd much rather talk to somebody who disagrees with me vehemently than somebody who agrees with me. I really would. I can learn more from somebody from that sort of thing than I can getting a pat on the back and an attaboy. Always was the case. On my old radio show, I used to move the naysayer, if you will, the opponent to the front of the line, even if they didn't call first, because I wanted to talk to them. They have a lot to say, especially if they're thoughtful. Now, also, people like to sling mud sometimes, and my mom used to tell me that when people start slinging mud at you, that's because they've run out of any confidence that the ideas they're trying to sell you, the intellectual connection they're trying to make, is just simply not worth your time, so they get personal. I don't get personal with people. I never have. I allow folks to say their piece. Occasionally, I lose patience with them, but I don't get personal. I'll let them say it once or twice or three times. It's kind of like giving them enough rope to hang themselves. Then we'll move on to something else. So that's always been my style. And I like the dialogue. I like the back and forth. Conversation is something that I think is a lost art. People don't talk to each other about matters of substance. They don't want to be embarrassed by what they think. They don't want to be judged by other people. I've never cared what anybody thought of me, so it doesn't make any difference to me what people think about it. I would rather they just think. I like a good argument I can disagree with better than I like a poor argument that I do agree with. That's unfortunately the reality of it, and sometimes it's difficult to get a thoughtful argument from someone, and I cherish those the most. So if you've got one of those things, feel free to share it with me. Again, here is the line, Vinny at SpokaneTalksMedia.com. If you want to have something to say, and we're running out of time here, but you can jump on if you'd like to, and we'd love to have you talk with us. And if we've got somebody, I'll go ahead and put them up, Vinny. But if not, I want to continue a little bit on this coronavirus thing. Some things to look at. I think the time has come for America to go back to work. Now, I understand that there are some circumstances, some geographies, some special conditions in certain populations in certain parts of the country where that is not going to be easily done. But I do think in certain populations, certain age groups, certain demographics, certain industries, that it's not necessary to keep those people at home anymore, because I don't think there is a medical benefit that you're going to be able to get from it. I know that they tell, but you got to keep it. Well, you can put a mask on and go to work. You can stay 6 feet apart from somebody and go to work. You don't have to necessarily be tested. If you're not sick, the odds are that you are carrying the virus there are odds that you are in certain circumstances, but they're relatively low. That the medical people have told us. Okay, and if you've already had it, and I think a whole lot more Americans have already had this than anybody knows. Even in my own family, there have been cases that were pretty harsh when it comes to flu and respiratory illness and what have you, that my own children and grandchildren have gotten over as early as early January and mid-January. And that could very well have been corona, but they have built up antibodies, and whether they've been tested or haven't been tested, they are not a risk to themselves or to you. And I think that now we have this little 15-minute test type of thing, and it's relatively inexpensive. And now that we've been told that it'll be underwritten if you want to take it, I think we should do that. And when we got people that come clear with testing negative, or when we have individuals who appear to have built up antibodies, I think we need to let those folks go back and earn their living. I don't think it's possible for us to spend into a huge deficit to bring back prosperity. I can understand a triage, a shot in the arm in the short haul, and that $2 trillion triage was pretty significant, and those checks, I understand, are going to start going into the mail as early as Monday or Tuesday, or not into the mail, but into people's bank accounts by direct deposit and into the mail thereafter shortly. And I do think that the impact of that is going to make a difference in the economy. I can see that the investors do not want to plunge the New York Stock Exchange into the abyss. Even with the report today, for example, of 6.6 million new jobless on top of the nearly 10 million we already had. So we're now at almost 17 million. Stock market was still up a few hundred points today. I think that there is reason to believe that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we need to start talking positively about that, because I believe that the worst damage that we could suffer as a country is going to be the damage that we would suffer economically over a long term, not the short term damage that we're going to suffer now, notwithstanding the death. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a harsh capitalist who believes that money is the answer and that's what we should really be focusing on. No, I know a lot of people have lost a lot of loved ones, and I feel a great deal of compassion and empathy for them. But then again, stop and think about something. Between 24 and 59,000 people have or will die from the ordinary flu since last October to the present day. Not coronavirus, the ordinary flu. And somehow or other, as a society, as a country, we have managed to compartmentalize those folks, if you will, as a sort of a cost of doing business. We get 16,000 people who die every year because of drunk drivers. And we've placed that in a category also. We get 88,000 folks who die from various other overdoses, and we get 53,000 who die from suicides. We've got a lot of people who die in this country, many an hour, every day, 365 days of the year. And we place those into certain, if you will, mental categories of, well, that's just the way life is. There's death and there's birth, and that's how it works. So we need to get some context with respect to this situation. Not that I'm suggesting that the deaths are not unique and that this coronavirus caught us by surprise, because we had no medications that we knew of off the top to be able to deal with it. We had no vaccines, and we're working on that. But the reality of it is that odds are by the end of this year, we're going to have about the same number of deaths from this that we have from the ordinary flu. It's looking that way now, and even the medical professionals will tell you, yeah, it's kind of looking that way. So we've got to ask ourselves, all right, the strategy has to shift gears. We have to do some things different from what we've been doing the last few weeks. Not that some of the things we're doing we don't keep in the mix. We will. We want to keep them in the mix, but there are other things we need to do. And the focus isn't that, okay, we've beaten it, so therefore we can get back to as usual. You can't just snap your finger and be back at a full employment. That's not going to happen. But the longer we wait, the longer it'll take to get to full employment, even after the medical threat is long gone. And that is something we should be thinking about a lot more, a lot stronger now than we have been for the last while. I think the time for fear is past. The time for a broadening of our strategy has come, and a time for honest intel, honest information about the risks we're taking and the likely effects. And I don't mean just using models, because these models obviously have failed us. I'm talking about looking at strategies that are predicated on the facts that are actually occurring in the field, as it were. And when we are able to do that, I think it makes sense to me that right around the end of the month, it's going to be time to go back to work for most Americans. We can phase it in over a period of time and test it a little bit, put a pinky in the water first, and if it's all right, immerse it a little further, etc. But we got to start moving in that direction. We got to start putting positivity back. We got to stop cowering in fear and start getting back to life as we used to know it. I don't think we'll ever be like we were before. This has changed so many things, and it will remain changed, I think. We're into a shift in paradigm even. But we will be able to get past this. I know we will.
Mike.
So I'll leave you with that thought then, okay? And I appreciate you tuning in and participating in the program today. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and we'll talk again.